Hello and welcome along to the latest Liverpool Echo Blood Red podcast. I'm Matt Addison. Keifer MacDonald is alongside me in the office, and we've also got Ian Doyle and Paul Gorst joining us from home. And Gorsty, I will come to you first. You've probably not long been back from the game last night. I don't know whether you travelled back this morning or last night, but it always feels like a long one to get to Leicester, but certainly a worthwhile trip. A good performance from Liverpool, another victory, and some decent performances, which we'll come to very shortly.
Yeah, last night we travelled home, so it was about 12 hours ago that we actually got back. So always a bit of a busy day post-game when you do a fairly lengthy away trip. But I thought it was probably one of the better ones for Liverpool this season, wasn't it? You know, they haven't had too much to shout about on the road this season. Obviously, the Leeds win a few weeks back was a particularly big one, and then followed on that one against West Ham a few weeks ago, and just continued on the good form, wasn't it? So what is it now? 9 games unbeaten. 7 successive wins. I think if Liverpool keep this up and go the entire, the rest of the season in this kind of form, and they do make it to 9 successive wins and 11 games unbeaten, that's almost a third of a season. And considering it, I mean, it might tell you a couple of things really kind of highlights how poor Liverpool have been when they have been, in the kind of some of the worst moments of the season. But also the fact that even with that, they can still put together this kind of run of consistency. I didn't particularly think they were going to be able to do what they're doing at the moment, given the form that had been, certainly up until the most recent international break. But they've managed to make some big strides, and I think they are taking a look at in terms of how they can use this as a springboard to next season, rather than we absolutely have to get Champions League. I mean, it'd be great if it came along, but I don't get the feeling that too many of them really believe it, other than just we'll win our games and see what happens. But certainly they've come on leaps and bounds to where they were, certainly at the beginning of the year anyway. It's been a bit of a difficult season, a bit of a strange one, but they are certainly the Premier League's form team at the moment alongside Man City, and we'll see what it gets them in the next, 10 days or so.
Yeah, we'll come on to sort of the Champions League race and how likely we each think it is at this point in the season, Doyle. But as Gorsty said there, I mean, it's a decent little spell now for Liverpool. We spoke a little bit a few weeks ago when they just started to put together this unbeaten run, and we weren't quite sure in terms of the sample size, but it feels like there's a bit of a substantial period now that we can look at and say, the new role for Trent, the emergence of Curtis Jones, a couple of other bits within this team. It doesn't feel like it's 1 or 2 games now, because, well, it isn't.
Sample size, there's a phrase you don't hear very often on this podcast. I mean, what other statistical things could we say? Mean, median, whatever it is, mode. I can't remember now. It's been a long time ago since I did my A-levels. Go back to Liverpool. I think that the interesting thing for me is that they've given themselves a reminder of how good they can be more than anything else. So they've taken confidence from that. I think that they've, we don't need to go through every single reason why they've struggled for this season, because we absolutely know. But I think that's what kind of played on their minds. They did think, well, is this really the end for, let's say, for example, Fabinho, who for a lot of the season has looked pretty poor, but I think he's played something like 12 or 13 successive games now. And I'd argue that the game last night was his best game that he's played certainly this year since before the Champions League final, since before the FA Cup final, in fact, because obviously he missed that with the injury last year. So he's been key to it. And again, you've got to give credit to the coaching staff, because they saw that, Klopp said we've got nothing to lose. We may as well go for it over the course of the last 2 months of the season, when he actually came out and said this. But we didn't know at the time that meant that they've come up with a new tactical approach, which would obviously bring more out of Trent. And the knock-on effect of that is that it's made Fabinho better. It's brought Curtis Jones into the team, which I'm sure we'll talk about him in a bit. And it's also helped them start to keep clean sheets, because there's better protection for the defence, and going forward they've got more threat. So it's like every single part of the game has improved due to this change. And of course, we know quite well that Dean Smith, the Leicester manager, last night said that we thought we'd come up with a plan to stop Trent getting the ball as much, and we just wanted to let the goalkeeper and Canales have it. Well, letting the keeper out, it wasn't a great move, was it? Because it was his kick that started the first goal. So you're going to get teams doing that. But the good thing for Liverpool, it means that they've got a bit of tactical variety now. They can go back to a normal, what we say, a normal, 4-3-3, a normal approach. They can use Trent in this way, and I'm pretty sure that over the summer when they get the players, and hopefully early. And it's going to be a long pre-season, as you know, we will come on to that in a bit. I'll give them more chance to do some more things. I think that Liverpool overall, it's kind of that regret, isn't it? It's that once again at the end of the season, the only team keeping pace with Man City is Liverpool. The only problem is Liverpool started when they were 8th, and Man City was 2nd. And Gorst, bring you in on this one. What was that statistic that you heard last night about Arsenal?
About Arsenal?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'll have to double check that now. I think it was since the World Cup, Liverpool and Arsenal got the same amount of points. 20 after 22 games played. I'm not too sure whether it is spot on, because I didn't mean to have a little look into it, but I haven't had a chance. I forgot all about it. But I mean that suggest. I mean, I suppose it just sums up how a crazy year it's been for Liverpool. You know, I think we generally tend to remember the worst moments, don't we, than the high moments, aside from obviously the incredible, you know, pandemonium that was the Manchester United game. I think, you know, defeats at Brentford and Brighton and Wolves tend to have a bit more of a marked effect than it would when you're beating Leeds 6-1 at Elm Road or whatever. I think that's maybe something in the general psyche of the football followers. I'm not sure, but it has been a strange season. We'll see whether they can top it all off by finishing in the top 4, and we'll say no more about it again and move on, but not too sure.
Yeah, Liverpool and Arsenal conceded the same number of goals this season as well. That was the surprising Arsenal stat that I saw from last night. But Keifer, you've been to a lot of the away games in the away end. If you were in the away end last night, weren't you, as well? I mean, there's been a fair few, I'm sure, where you've been travelling back a little bit confused about what you've seen, but that was certainly a mood lifter, I would say, in terms of an away performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, obviously Leicester haven't been the team that they have been in recent years, but I still think there was a bit of trepidation going, you know, yesterday, given it is on the road and Liverpool still kind of in the early stages, you know, of this new formation. As you say, Matt, the sample size is still quite small. And I think last night was the perfect performance in terms of control from start to finish. Okay, I think Klopp said, you know, the first 15 minutes maybe wasn't ideal, but I think after that, and especially after the first goal, the way they kind of, you know, shut the game off and managed it was really good. And, you know, on another night, if they wanted to, it feels like they probably could have got a 4th and a 5th. Obviously, Gakpo had the chance in the first half at 1-0 or 2-0, I think it was. And then obviously Salah has one late on to kind of put the icing on the cake, which, you know, was a rare miss on his standards. But, you know, the thing that I kind of took away from it was, obviously, it was a 3rd clean sheet on the bounce, which obviously is, you know, something that Liverpool struggled with on the road, as we've said. But with this formation, we've kind of seen, obviously, the game against Tottenham where they kind of lost control and obviously let them back into the game in the second half. We've seen, you know, the games against Brentford and Fulham, you know, in recent weeks where, you know, they've been closely contested games and they've maybe edged it and maybe hung on a bit at the end. But this one felt like from minute 1 to minute 90 that Liverpool had full control over the game. And I think, obviously, as you say, the sample size is small, but, you know, now we are seeing that kind of all these players are starting to come into their own. Obviously, as Doyle says, Fabinho, I thought he was absolutely immense last night. Curtis Jones gets his 3rd goal in his last 4 games, I think it is. Obviously, Trent continues to earn his plaudits. And, you know, now it's like that old thing is you're never as far away as, you know, people kind of think that you are. And, you know, I think there was kind of this time last year when Gary Neville was saying, you know, United were, you know, 5 or 6 years after Liverpool, and everyone kind of was like, this is crazy, you know, it's going to take a mammoth rebuild. And, you know, now obviously Liverpool are 1 point behind. I know United do have the game in hand, and obviously the perception was obviously that Liverpool, obviously they do need a significant rebuild to some extent, but I think obviously now as kind of the re-emergence of Curtis Jones and kind of the form he's found himself in now, you know, you're looking at it and the whole picture is completely different to what we were maybe talking about during the World Cup break and even during the new year. And as Gorst says, that run in January where they lost to Brighton, they lost to Wolves and obviously got knocked out the FA Cup as well. So, you know, there's plenty of positives. And I just think that performance last night, the control kind of epitomised everything this new system can bring. And it does feel like, you know, coming out the ground last night, it felt really bizarre because, yeah, Liverpool are 5th, but it, you know, so Klopp obviously did the fist pumps at the end, and it genuinely felt like there was a title race going on, and it was quite weird in the sense of it was quite reminiscent of the games in, you know, 18-19 and obviously not 19-20 as such, but, you know, even last season where, you know, you kind of every point matters, and it was really weird because, you know, I said to my mates after we still are 5th, and, you know, with the game in hand it'll probably be 4 points, but it just kind of feels as though something is brewing at Liverpool again and building quite nicely. And obviously, it's a shame that the season is coming to an end because, you know, Liverpool, as are probably the second best team in the country at the moment on current form. But if they can add a few new additions into that and get a lengthened pre-season and kind of get the pre-season schedule right, it only bodes for positivity next campaign, which is something everyone will look forward to.
I think in all of our answers so far, we've all mentioned Curtis Jones, Gorsty. So let's come on to him next. Obviously gets the 2 goals, looks really at home in this kind of more advanced role and a bit more of a free role. The consistency we've seen him over the last few games has been really excellent. And it's just great to see him kind of being able to express himself, I'd say.
Yeah, I thought when he come into the team for the Chelsea game, I think it was a bit more of a statement from the manager in terms of you're just being absolutely paced to the Manchester City and I'm bringing the changes because none of us deserve to really keep your place. So he benefited from that, but since then he started off a little bit understated, mature performances, not really doing too much, given what we know he is able to do. We had the chance to speak to him after the game at the time, and he said it was very much about keeping it simple and trying to regain the manager's trust. And I think now, 9 games later, and he's played in all of those games, I think you can certainly say that he has certainly regained the trust of Jurgen Klopp, hasn't he? He's flourishing at the moment because he's able to move off towards the left of the midfield, which is not too dissimilar to where he made his name in youth football, on the left of Liverpool's front 3 when he was the captain of the under-21s and whatever else coming through. And he started to add some goals to his game, hasn't he? What is that, 3 and 4 now? Me and Doyle were speaking to someone last night who was telling us that it's kind of been a little bit of a tactic for Liverpool to instruct Jones to attack the far post. And the goal was, the first one was very similar to the Tottenham one, wasn't it? Meeting it at the back post, little cushioned in step with his left foot into the bottom corner. And Klopp referenced that himself in his post-match press conference. So, yeah, he's enjoying probably his best period as a Liverpool player at the moment. So obviously always someone who's been coming in for, league games against some of the lesser lights of the league, if you like, and cup games here or there. But at the moment, he's starting every game regardless of who the opposition is. And he's thriving really because of the way he's taken on the challenge, but also with Trent Alexander-Arnold moving into more central areas, that allows him to move out of that packed midfield off towards the left, supply some help for Andy Robertson and Luis Diaz or Diogo Jota, whoever it is on that left. And long may it continue. I don't think it indicates Liverpool's need to be bringing in any fewer midfielders as a result of his form. I still think Liverpool need to do some serious work on that midfield department this summer, but he's certainly shown that he belongs in the squad and is now becoming more and more of a serious option for whatever game Liverpool are playing, doesn't matter who it is. So, good on him. He's enjoying his best moments as a Liverpool player, I suppose.
We've had plenty of conversations on this podcast about him over the last couple of years, Doyle, in terms of his position in the squad. And I think we've all kind of firmly said at the very least he can be in this Liverpool squad. He can be a squad option and be a player for the next few years for Liverpool. But has the last few games changed your perception of him at all? Do you think he's maybe got a higher ceiling in terms of becoming a first team, one of the first names on the team sheet week in, week out? Or what's the sort of verdict from yourself in terms of what he's done over the last few games?
Well, I think I'm not sure whether any of them will be, because of the position he plays in the midfield. I don't think he'll ever be one of the first names on the team sheet because they're going to end up with so many midfielders. You look at Fabinho, if he's actually playing well, as we said before, he is. But after that, the rest of them aren't really going to be, what you could say are absolute certainties to be playing. A bit different if they're playing in a final or whatever have you. But then the team will have evolved to a certain degree, so you'd have a good idea, which has happened in the past. But as Gorsty said, Liverpool are going to be making 2, possibly 3 midfield signings in the summer. So it's interesting that Fabinho and Jones have kind of not so much responded to that, but kind of thought, well, hang on, there's going to be a load of new ones coming in here, and I know quite well that Oxlade-Chamberlain and Keifer haven't been playing. Arthur hasn't played, and Milner is he's obviously the elder statesman. You've still got Henderson, you've got Elliott, and don't forget that Rakitic is another one who came in for a little bit. It's funny, isn't it, that it was only was it February or January he was playing instead of Fabinho, and everyone was like, oh, that's great. But it does go to show that if you get a bit of legs in around Fabinho, which is what Jones has got because he's only 22, which is what Trent is also offering by going in there as well, he can just concentrate on just being Fabinho, that is, can just concentrate on being the player he needs to be. And part of that is down to Jones because he's shown that he can play in a number of positions. We know he can play on the left as a forward, but Liverpool must have about 13,000 players who can play there. So it's good for his career that he's learned how to play in midfield. I mean, Gorst has spoken to him, I think it's after the Chelsea game. And when he's spoken in the past, and he spoke after the game last night, and he said that he's had to change his game. And he's always been quite, the thing about Curtis is that he's always been a very confident lad. But on top of that, you always got the sense that he's a confidence player, which means that he does need a run in the team, and he does need to have a confidence that while he might always have that internally, it's a bit more difficult to express that when you're playing out on the football field. Everybody has dips in form, but I think he's played 95 games now for Liverpool. So it's not like he might be young in terms of age, certainly as he's young compared to me, let's put it that way. But he's young compared to an awful lot of his teammates. But nearly 100 games, and as Gorsty said, this is probably his best run he's ever had in a team with his best form. So Liverpool have invested a lot of time and effort and energy into this player because they knew he would end up becoming a first-team player. And even if he didn't play again after yesterday, I said he's nearly played 100 games for Liverpool. That's a Liverpool who are probably amongst the best Liverpool teams that's ever been. So, this is a player who's got real quality. And okay, let's the fact that he's homegrown, he's always going to have that kind of thing against him because some of the supporters prefer the shiny new signings. And he's unfortunately had to do his growing up in the Liverpool team. Whereas, let's just say, for argument's sake, someone like Alexis McAllister, he's done it in Argentina. He's done it away from the main teams. He's done it at Brighton. I'm pretty sure he made loads of mistakes when he started at Brighton. But now that he's looking, this good and he's won the World Cup, suddenly everybody's interested. People forget about all the other stuff that he's had to go through. Like every other footballer's had to go through. Curtis has had to do this at Liverpool in the spotlight. We're as responsible for that as anybody because we go to the youth league games, we go to the under-21s, the under-18s. We've seen him, and even when Steven Gerrard was in charge of the under-18s, he was like, Curtis is going to be a really good player, and he was right because everybody knew he would. What you're seeing now is a player who perhaps now believes that he deserves to be where he is, and it's also interesting that the position he plays is essentially it's Thiago's position, isn't it? On the left of that midfield three. That's where Thiago's been playing since he's come to Liverpool. And he offers totally different things, but because he offers them, it allows Trent to perhaps provide some of the stuff that Thiago provides by doing those passes, by doing that kind of thing, by dictating the play. So Liverpool do have a tactical variety, and a lot of that's down to the fact that you've got players like Curtis Jones who can change their game. And as I said, he was only 22 in January, so there's still going to be even more to come from him. And I'm pretty sure, he'd say exactly the same thing because he scored against Tottenham, scored 2 against Leicester last night. He's got a load more goals than anybody who's watched him play for any, when he was back with the academy. I mean, I think in the youth league, there was one season where he's quite clearly probably the best player in the competition, full stop. But then he got moved up to the first team, so then he didn't play in the knockout stages. So I do think that Curtis, I'm not going to do the whole thing of like he's like a new signing because he's not. He's just basically like the player that everybody hoped he would become, and I think that's what he's becoming now.
Yeah, I think he was really excellent last night. I think as well, if let's say James Maddison had put in that kind of performance against Liverpool, I'm sure there'd be a fair few Liverpool fans.
Well, James Maddison, I genuinely, while I was there, I didn't even notice he was playing until about 9 minutes ago. Said that to Gorst before. It was like he just had no impact on the game. And I know it's not just down to him. There's an awful lot going on at Leicester, but you're right. If Jones does that kind of performance, everybody want to sign him.
Absolutely. And I think, as we've all mentioned, again, Keifer, sort of the position that Trent is picking up is a big part of that. Jones, him, Fabinho. It's starting to look like there's a bit of a midfield plan moving forwards. And then you can add in the new transfers and what will happen in the summer. It starts to look like, rather than a big problem for Liverpool, a bit more of an exciting thing for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, isn't it? Having options. And it is, we've kind of seen it with the front line now that they've obviously kind of subtly done the rebuild over a couple of windows. And obviously, I know Firmino's going, but they've now got 5 quality options. And you look at the midfield, and you'd imagine that will take place this summer, and over the the next 6 to 12 months, that will kind of flesh out quite nicely. And then if you are back to competing on, forefronts as Liverpool were last season, especially if they are playing in the Europa League and they have that kind of tight, Thursday, Sunday turnaround, they've got quality players, whoever the opposition is. And we saw that last season as they went for the quadruple, how important that was, your likes of your Minaminos and your Origis who were willing to step up in those kind of lesser games. And what that does for Liverpool in terms of the bigger picture, in terms of building momentum in the Champions League and building momentum in the Premier League. And, it's why I wonder there was a conversation, well, I say conversation, but there was some people who were maybe willing for the idea of Jota to kind of go this summer when there was a few murmurs. And it's like, you finally get, strength in depth. I mean, you only have to look at Man City, but between the two Real Madrid games, the team they were able to field at Everton on Sunday, Jack Grealish comes in, Riyad Mahrez, Julian Alvarez, still start Erling Haaland. And that's what Liverpool are up against. And, I imagine City will strengthen again in the summer. And if Liverpool are going to get back to the kind of the upper echelons of the certainly the Premier League, they're going to have to go toe to toe and rack up 95, 96, 97 points again. And having players, I mean, you look at Harvey Elliott now, who, he started obviously big wins this season. Obviously started against City at Anfield, didn't he? He started at Spurs the other week, started against United. He's played, 45 games this. I think he'd played every game up until Chelsea away, hadn't he? And then obviously he's kind of had a couple of weeks out of the team now. And all of a sudden you think that, well, maybe he is the fourth or fifth choice, which just shows how quickly the pecking order changes. And as Doyle says, it becomes a situation where there probably isn't a pecking order because, different tactics, different teams and, different varieties of, if Thiago comes back, for instance, how does that change his Trent's role? Because, he likes to come deep and pick up the ball and kind of be that deep line playmaker. So, there is plenty for Liverpool to kind of think about. And I suppose that's only good because at times we've seen this season when we've been crying out for changes, as I go back to that kind of that January 2023 and you were just crying out for something different, a bit of creativity and they were kind of just stuck with that 4-3-3 and they experimented with other, 4-1-2-1-2 earlier in the season and obviously it didn't work. But now it feels like they have that 4-3-3, which obviously they've swept a lot in terms of trophies with over the last couple of years. But they also have this new kind of, whatever formation you want to call it with the box midfield. And, obviously the kind of buzzword at Liverpool over the kind of the last 24, 18 months kind of thing has been, obviously it's been intensity, hasn't it? But obviously their identity of being different and unpredictable, and Liverpool are at the moment. It looks like no one knows how to deal with this new system, and it is, like I say, it is promising, and Jones is obviously largely down to that, and kind of echo what the lads say there about in terms of his position. You look at obviously he's replacing Thiago, but if you go further back in terms of Wijnaldum, who was the ultimate kind of systematic player in terms of where he came from Newcastle, where he's obviously a bit more of a wide forward, and Klopp kind of transformed into like the ultimate recyclable player who could win possession, bring it forward, and it felt like Jones obviously took that role, didn't he, when he played the left centre mid, but now he's kind of been given further license for freedom, and he's a bit less restricted in his role. And I think we are starting to see the player that we saw in the academy all those years ago, and there's as they say, he's nearly played 100 games for Liverpool and probably certainly the best team of the 21st century, and that's no mean feat, is it? So long may it continue, and it'd only benefit Liverpool if it is to.
Yeah, certainly two excellent performances from Trent and from Curtis Jones last night. But let's talk about a player that wasn't playing, Gorsty, and Roberto Firmino. We heard the song going off in the background as Liverpool played. There were celebrations after the match as well in terms of sort of celebrating what he has done for Liverpool. Obviously, his time at Liverpool is coming to an end, but it was nice to have that moment. I think we do expect him to be back in training this week, of course, but it was nice to have that moment just before he does leave Liverpool at the end of this season.
Yeah, it was great that he chose to travel with the team, wasn't it? Because, I'm sure Liverpool fans would have been in full voice for him regardless, but it was great that he was there to see it. The cameras panned in on him with that beam and smile. And then lovely touch at the end, I thought, actually, when he went over with the rest of his teammates and they were kind of shoving him to the centre of the stage and he was taking in all the adulation. I think someone signed it and it went on for 8 minutes straight, the Firmino song yesterday. And it was only kind of ended because Alexander-Arnold stuck one in the top corner. It's going to be an emotional one Saturday, isn't it? I think Liverpool have become accustomed to losing big names on free transfers at the end of the season in the last 3, 4, 5 years. Emre Can, Gini Wijnaldum, Divock Origi, but I think Saturday will be a big one for Firmino and James Milner, of course. But yeah, it was a great moment, and he actually come walking past us in the mix zone just as he was leaving Firmino, he was on the team coaching. He was just beaming from ear to ear. You know, he obviously loved what his teammates had done on the pitch, and he just seemed to be a little overwhelmed with the reception that he got. But nothing less than he deserves. He's been an absolute legend, hasn't he? A modern day great, and probably for me, someone who personifies the Jurgen Klopp era. Really, you know, obviously preceded Klopp by about 3 or 4 months, but I think perhaps only Jordan Henderson come in before him. Maybe Joe Gomez or Milner. They came in the same summer, didn't he? So that's splitting hairs, really. But yeah, a real legendary figure of the club who deserves all the adulation that he gets Saturday afternoon, and hopefully he can play a part. And it'd be great to come off the bench with 20 to go and just added to his goal tally, wouldn't he? Imagine Anfield might blow the roof off the Anfield Road before it's even gone on.
Yeah, it'd certainly be nice to see him. I mean, we have heard a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, Dory, that he's going to return to team training and then hasn't quite managed it. And we thought he might have been back by this point. But yeah, fingers crossed he can get that send-off at Anfield. And even if he doesn't get onto the pitch, I'm sure there'll be similar scenes at Anfield as what there was last night at the King Power.
Yeah, as Ghosty said, it was a nice touch that he went. Not just him as well, was the Nunes went as well. But obviously Firmino just trots over to the away end after the game, because the only thing that stopped them singing it was Trent scored, because they would have still probably still be doing it now. You know, on the way home, woke up this morning, still been doing it. But yeah, I mean, what is it? 8 years at Liverpool. I think is it right? No one's played more games under Jurgen Klopp as a manager than Firmino. I mean, I don't think people are ready for what's going to happen on Saturday. To be honest, it's going to be an emotional occasion. Not just as Gus said, not just for him. I mean, there's Milner as well, and we can't ignore the others as well. You know, Navigator's going, and it's not quite worked out for him at Liverpool. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain the same, and who knows what would have happened to him if he didn't pick up that injury against Roma. That's what's that now? 5 years ago now, isn't it? So, but he's somebody who played an awful lot during the title-winning season in 2019-20. So, and Adrian as well, who's definitely gone down as the most successful second-choice goalkeeper in Liverpool's history, purely on, you know, trophies won. What did he won the Community Shield this year? He played in the Super Cup final. He won a Premier League trophy. So, you know, he couldn't have really done much more for what he did. Got more reward for what he did, I should say. And there's Arthur Mello. Remember him? He was on the bench at Leicester. I mean, it seems a bit. We were talking about this on the way home. Ghosty, we had a couple of people in the car, and we were saying that it would be a bit harsh if he gets all the way through the season by never playing in the Premier League, because it wasn't his fault he got injured, you know. And there was a reason why he got bought, was to cover for the injuries, and then he picked up one. So it would be nice to see him play. But for all of that, Liverpool's still going for the Champions League, aren't they? So there's not going to be any like throwing people on just for the sake of it. If anyone's coming on, Liverpool will need them to do something, unless, of course, Liverpool are 2 or 3-0 up with about 2 minutes to go. But you know, Aston Villa isn't going to be easy. We'll touch on that in a podcast later this week. So, yeah, but for me, you know, I think we had a bit of a glimpse there, didn't we? If that's what 3,000 people think, imagine what 53,000 people are going to be thinking.
Yeah, it's going to be some celebration of him, isn't it, Keifer, on Saturday? And yeah, as Dory says, not just him, but I think him probably more than all of the others, just because he kind of sums up the Jurgen Klopp era. I mean, well, I heard you and Rich in the office before talking about favourite moments and kind of trying to pick out one of those. But I suppose he's just one of those players that's a really hard thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one that stands out, if I had to pick one, was the Club World Cup final goal in terms of importance. And obviously Liverpool had never won that before, and obviously a goal in the final is. And the manner of the celebrations as well over in Qatar, just I think that just summed up for me, didn't it? All his teammates on top of him and shirt off. I think it was even maybe a no look as well in there. So, there's everything about him. And as Gorst said, he's a modern day great. Obviously, a term not to be overused, but he absolutely fits the description. And it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? Because obviously there has been Wijnaldum, Emre Can's and Origi's who have left, but this does feel like the first big one. Obviously, Wijnaldum only had a tenth of the stadium or a quarter of the stadium. Obviously, when he left, 2 years ago. So that wasn't. Obviously, it was a send off, but it wasn't a full, send off as what it probably should have been. And then obviously Mane, I think people, maybe thought it would be his last game, but there was no real commotion or anything like that. So he didn't again get the departure he deserved. So obviously Firmino's the first real, if you're talking about significant members of the first team, he is, as someone who kind of defined the Klopp era, he is going to be the first one. And obviously therefore it's going to be an emotional occasion on Saturday. And obviously I don't think anyone's looking forward to it, but you just hope they can get on the pitch and kind of, either way there will be, obviously he'll get his guard of honour and all that kind of stuff, but you just hope he can get on the pitch and just kind of, just have one last appearance in a Liverpool shirt. But, if that isn't to be the case, what his last involvement, apart from coming on at Leeds, was that goal against Arsenal. No more fitting opponent than against Arsenal in front of the Kop end, a late header. So, there's that as well. But yeah, it will be a sad one, and it will close the book on a wonderful Liverpool career.
Yeah, I can only imagine what the scenes would be like if he came off the bench and scored the winner. But I'm sure it'll be an interesting afternoon anyway for him. But let's talk a little bit about the Champions League race. We'll talk about pre-season as well just before we finish, Gorsty. But I'll come to you first on the top four race and how likely you think it is. We've kind of touched on this a few times on the podcast. Liverpool keep winning, but the other teams keep doing just about enough to stay ahead. It kind of feels still like a bit of a stretch, but Liverpool have just got to win the two games and see what happens, I suppose.
Yeah, I think Liverpool have just ran out the road a little bit, haven't they? They've only got 2 games left. I think if the season would have extended another 3-4 games, maybe they might just have enough in the tank to do it. But I'm not sure at the moment. You're looking at those Newcastle games thinking they've still got Brighton to play, they've still got Chelsea, and is it Leicester is the other one? Maybe there's enough room in there for a slip up, but they probably need a couple, don't they? I think Brighton will be a really tough one for Newcastle. Chelsea could be anything, couldn't they? They've been shocking for months on end, so we'll see. But I just think the fact that Liverpool have given themselves a real chance is more of an indicator for what they might be able to do in terms of having a good summer and using it as a platform going into next season. I think it might just be a little bit too late, to be honest, for them to get Champions League, but we'll see.
Doyle, how likely is it, if you had to put a number on it, what sort of percentage do you think it is for Liverpool to get into the top four?
10, 20%. Not much, is it? I think as Gorst said, they've just run out of games. So after such a terrible season, the irony is that most of them will be wishing it wouldn't end. But unfortunately, everybody else is 38 games in the Premier League season, and that's that time frame is when you're supposed to deliver. And Liverpool weren't able to do it in the first half of the season. We checked out that stat, by the way, and it's Arsenal have taken 1 more point than Liverpool since the World Cup. So that's over the last 22 games. So that does that gives them a certain sense of regret because they're still 16 points behind Arsenal. So it just goes to show that if they'd a bit more clever at the start of the season, they'd be in a much different position and they wouldn't have been scrambling around. I mean, the 3 games they'll come back down to are Leeds at home, Forest away, which was in the space of a few days, and Bournemouth away. And if you win 2 of them, quite easily done, given the fact they absolutely tomped Bournemouth, beat Leeds, and they just about got past Nottingham Forest at home. And they'd easily be in the top 4, which is probably where, a lot of people, I've always said this about certain teams, they should be getting more points or they're getting fewer points. You look at, I think Arsenal have got more points than perhaps they should have done this season. Liverpool have had fewer. Like last season, I think Man United should have had 10 more points. They kind of just chucked it in towards the end of the season. They were 10 points better off. And they've been doing that this season. But I think Liverpool at least 6, 7, 8 points better than they've shown, which if they win the last 2 games would have taken them up to nearly 80 points. And I don't think anyone would say it was a bad season, but the reality is that's what's happened. That's what they did. And the regret is that they're showing it now, what we thought would have been at the start of the season. I don't think they were ever going to be challenging for the league. I remember we did the podcast right at the start of the season. Everybody's like, it's going to be between Liverpool and City, and Liverpool can win this, that, and the other. And I was the only one who said they're going to win nothing because it's a transitional season, and I just wasn't expecting it to be this transitional. It's more of a transitional 7 months, wasn't it, until they finally got everything together. So, no, I don't think they'll finish in the top 4. But they're in the Europa League now. They're definitely finishing the top 6. So I think Klopp said, well, he did say after the game last night that he said 6 or 7 weeks ago, wouldn't have believed would have even been in that. So that tells you the kind of mindset that Liverpool were in at that time. And who knows, these next, we may look back on these last 2 months, the last 2 months of this season as a bit of a turning point in the Klopp era, where they've gone from his first great team heading towards his next challenging or trophy challenging team.
yeah, I suppose at the very least you can look at these 9 games in terms of this being the start of next season. But Gorsty, we wanted to talk about pre-season as well, because that's going to be a big thing for Liverpool. Some plans starting to go into place in terms of how that's going to look, and a little bit different to how it has been in the past couple of seasons.
Yeah, so Liverpool have announced this morning that they're going back to Singapore, something that we reported on, I think it was maybe late March. They're going back to play in the Standard Chartered Trophy, or rather defend the esteemed Standard Chartered Trophy that Doyle was there to see them win last season against Crystal Palace, was it? So they're playing Leicester City and Bayern Munich. But I think the key difference with Liverpool's pre-season this summer is the fact that they're kind of doing a little bit of a different way around, and that they're going to go to Germany first on the European-based hard work and training camp, which is very much about football work, tactical work, getting the intensity levels up, the fitness in the legs, the base level fitness is up, all that kind of stuff that you never used to like to do when you played Sunday League and you went back to pre-season. You always knew it was going to be a bit of a slog. So that's what Liverpool are going to be under in the Black Forest. And then they do the commercial-driven jaunt a little bit later on. So that's been flipped around. And I think that's been a Jurgen Klopp decision. Very much seems determined behind the scenes to make sure that there's no repeat of this season. And he feels that getting all of his players up to the right levels of fitness early on is key to that. Because I think if you look across last season, you got Diogo Jota injury, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, Curtis Jones got injured in the Community Shield, which he's still dealing with, to be honest. So probably Naby Keita was injured in there at some point as well. It's something that Liverpool are trying to minimalise this season by flipping around the schedule, and still going to have friendlies in Germany as well as Singapore, but a little bit of a different schedule this time around, which is very much being driven by the football operation side rather than the commercial side of things, which we know is so important to clubs the size of Liverpool, and particularly Liverpool for the way they work, being self-sustainable and all that. The projected income somewhere between 10 and 12 million for those trips. So Liverpool need that money, but certainly Klopp seems to have maybe put his foot down a little bit and thought, we're doing it this way this time around, and we're going to make sure that we're not going to have any of the nonsense of last summer where players were dropping like flies, weren't they, early on in the season.
Yeah, we know how important pre-season is, Doyle, in terms of what Liverpool do. We've seen evidence of that in the past where they've had a longer pre-season. They tend to have a better season that follows that. But it kind of feels especially important to me this summer that there's no tournament to go off to. There's none of the other distractions, because they are going to have a bit of an overhaul in terms of the midfield. They're going to have to integrate probably quite a few more players than what we've seen, certainly in a couple of summers under Jurgen Klopp. It kind of feels like they need that time to be able to use it wisely to get ready for next season.
Well, don't forget, you've got some other players like Calvin Ramsey, who's been there for a year now and has barely played. And I think he was back on the pitch, wasn't he, last week on the training pitch, doing a bit of running around. So he's somebody else who'd be looking to have a fresh start. They'll make 2, 3, possibly 4 signings, depends on which players leave. Who knows what the goalkeeping situation is going to be like? Who knows what the centre-back situation is going to be like? So, yeah, I don't think there's going to be that. I don't think, there's been summers where Liverpool have had to integrate more players. Like 2018, quite a few players came in then. 2016, 17 as well, to be fair. So it's only the last couple of years that they've kind of been a bit more targeted in what they've required, but they're going to need more than they've had in the last couple of years. But even then, Gakpo came in halfway through the season. Nunes has got a year under his belt. So certainly going to be in better shape than they were last year, because I don't necessarily think there's going to be any. I know we just said Firmino's leaving, but he's hardly played really this season, and he kind of was knocked out of the first team as a regular last season. There's going to be nobody like massively major integral leaving now, is there? I don't think in the summer. I think they're now going to be building on what they've got, which is a better position to be in than, say, when Sadio Mane left last year or when Wijnaldum left the year before that, although they found a way around that one. There are some players who are a lot easier to replace than others, and I think Liverpool aren't necessarily losing ones that are going to be difficult to replace. It just means that certainly in the midfield, they're going to have to get the right players in to help the ones that are there already.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, certainly the back end of this season has set it up nicely for a good pre-season and a good start to next season as well, hopefully. But that will just about do us for today's podcast. Thanks to Paul and to Ian for joining me, and for Keifer as well alongside me in the office. we'll catch you all next time right here on the Blood Red channel.